You see, most people today aren't really living, they're just executing a pre-installed program. They wake up at the same hour, travel the same roads, talk about the same things, love according to patterns, believe with the majority, consume as programmed. Every movement seems voluntary, but underneath is an invisible code, the command be alike. Society praises compliance, calls it morality, extols harmony, calls it maturity. And so people start identifying themselves with the mask they wear, until they no longer remember who put it on their face. They don't ask, what do I want, but what is everyone else doing? But when you don't choose, others choose for you, and they always choose what makes you obedient. An obedient life is a stable life, but stability isn't living. The danger isn't living wrong, but living right according to what others want. What is called morality, most of it doesn't come from strength, but from fear. When weak people can't win through instinct, they find ways to win through concepts. And so, they create a spiritual system, a network of values woven from their own fears, to control the strong and glorify weakness. I call it slave morality, the kind of morality born not to elevate people, but to soothe the pain of those who can't rise. They turn submission into virtue, strength into sin. They call pity love, and the desire for self-assertion arrogance. They bind instinct with words, then console themselves that they're noble for denying the natural. Sheep call the lion's roar a crime, and their own bleating morality. And when enough sheep bleat in unison, the roar becomes taboo. Thus, people learn to hide their strength, to be called humble, learn to bow their heads to be loved, learn to obey to be safe. In such a world, good no longer means being true to one's essence, but conforming to the model the crowd exalts. People fear being different, fear judgmental gazes, fear standing alone. They choose the safety of the crowd over the uncertainty of freedom. They call uniformity peace, and forget that peace is built on the foundation of spiritual surrender. Modern humans have become masters at disguising fear with moral language. They say, I'm doing the right thing, but that right thing is just what gets them accepted. They say, I'm living kindly, but that kindness is just another form of obedience. They've lost the ability to doubt inherited values, because doubt unsettles the crowd. And while the strong seek to create, the weak create reasons not to create. They fear strength because strength demands responsibility. They fear freedom because freedom means loneliness. So they build a world where the free become sinners, and the obedient are sainted. But their saints are just those who've abandoned themselves to be worshipped. Morality in that form is no longer a light guiding the way, but a deceptive lantern hanging from the prison ceiling, illuminating the gilded bars. When morality becomes a tool to evade instinct, it's no longer light, but golden chains. Modern society is a brightly lit prison where everyone happily locks themselves in. No one needs to wield a whip. No one needs to shout commands, because obedient souls self-regulate. People aren't forced. They bind themselves with the need for recognition. They live not to exist, but to be approved. They don't ask what's right, but what's popular. The symbols of chains have changed form. No longer churches, schools, or strict laws, but glowing screens like counts, others' gazes. A world where your value is measured in likes, in agreements, in the majority's eyes. There, people trade freedom for reassurance, identity for harmony, soul for image. And the tragedy is, they call this prison civilization. They give it beautiful names: order, discipline, safety. They believe they're progressing, but really they're just learning to live in fancier cages. Compliance becomes the new survival instinct. People don't need orders to obey. They obey out of habit. Whenever they differ, the fear of rebellion rises, and they hurriedly correct themselves to fit. They fear being seen, fear being forgotten, fear being left behind. So instead of stepping out the door, they hang more lights in the cell, paint the walls bright colors, and console themselves that they're living in light. No bars, just mirrors. They look into them and believe they're free, because in those mirrors, they see the version of themselves society allows, the polished, edited, timely one. They don't realize the mirror never reflects the soul, it only reflects the trained appearance. And so, day by day they perform the role of good person, not because they believe it, but because they're afraid. Afraid of different eyes, afraid of losing their place in the herd, afraid of standing alone in the wind. And society, knowing this better than anyone, feeds that fear with rewards, titles, the feeling of belonging. Souls gradually become smooth, docile, sleek, like stones worn down by countless consenting hands. No edges, no doubt, no roar, just the unison whisper. This is freedom, but what freedom needs to be proven? What freedom depends on others' gazes? The more orderly a society, the more tamed the soul. Order isn't a sign of civilization, but proof that every rebellious flame has been extinguished. When I say God is dead, I didn't kill him. People stopped believing in him but still pretend they do. That's not the death of a god, but the death of the foundation of meaning. People killed God with indifference by turning faith into ritual, morality into habit, truth into slogan. They still talk about God, but in an empty voice. They still recite prayers, but their eyes lack light. The collapse of absolute values, religion, morality, tradition, has left a void they dare not look into. Instead of facing the nothingness, people pretend they keep the old shells, repeat soulless words, worship decayed images, just because they're afraid to create something new. They carry God's corpse from century to century and call it morality. In that ritual, they bow before a coffin, believing they're bowing to the divine. But in that coffin there's no God, just fear that if they open the lid, they'll see their own emptiness. They continue following old values, not because they're right, but because they make the world look orderly. And in that fake stability, the human soul withers. When there's no absolute anchor, they should create new values, but creation requires courage, and courage is what the crowd has lost. So they choose comfortable lies over naked truth. They rebuild idols from the material of fear and kneel to what they've made. They call it faith, but it's just the continuation of mental habit. They say we need morality to live, but they don't realize that morality died with God. And because they can't accept the emptiness, they paint the corpse, shine light on darkness, label indifference belief, and thus nothingness dons holy robes. The most dangerous person isn't the atheist, but the one who believes what he no longer believes. Because he doesn't just deceive others, he deceives his own soul and drags humanity into slumber in that fake faith. When old values collapse, people suddenly find themselves drifting in an invisible void. No anchor, no direction. They realize what once held them steady, faith, morality, tradition, has cracked. And in that collapse, they fall into a nothingness I call the void. It's not losing faith that hurts, but losing a place to put faith. When every concept once light is now just shadow, People still cling to them like drowning men to rotten planks. They hang their souls in thin air and call it hope. But that hope is just a reflex, no longer strength. In that confusion, people feel loneliness to the bone, not because no one's beside them, but because they no longer belong to any world. They're not naive enough to believe old values, but not strong enough to create new ones. They're stuck between two realities, a dead world and one not yet born. And in that silence their souls tremble, as if waiting for a divine command no one sends anymore. But right in that void, real life begins to stir faintly, because the void isn't the end. It's a blank canvas for you to paint yourself. When there's nothing to believe in, you're forced to become the source of belief. When there's no one to follow, you're forced to walk by your own will. The loneliness of the void isn't a curse, but an opportunity. It's the silence before new music plays, the night before free light dawns. But most people fear that void, so they return to old lies, seek comfort in dead concepts. They fear the void, like they fear themselves, because the void is a mirror reflecting the naked soul with nowhere to hide. But only when you dare stand before the void without trembling can you begin to create. Because all birth starts from emptiness, and every true person is born from the long night of their own solitude. In the moment people face the void, the real question is no longer, what do I believe in? But what can I create? It's here I speak of the will to power, the primal energy that not only lets people survive, but affirm their essence and create the world. The will to power isn't the desire to dominate others, but the craving to become oneself in the purest form. It's the force that demands you not react to life, but create it. Because reaction belongs to the dominated, creation to the free. The strong don't ask what the world wants from them. They ask, what can I create for the world? Society teaches you to adapt, to make do, to blend in for safety. But true life isn't born to blend, it's born to transcend. A seed doesn't adapt to the soil, it tears through darkness to reach light. People are the same. If you only learn to exist, you'll forget how to live. The will to power is the inner flame, urging you beyond defensive instincts, out of the warm embrace of approval, into the wilderness of creation. That's when people stop living as consequences and become causes. When you no longer ask, what meaning does life have, but what meaning can I give life? You've transcended the herd. The modern world likes people who are just enough, smart enough to succeed, obedient enough not to rebel. But the will to power never stops at enough. It always demands more, not more than others, but more than yesterday's self. It's in creative action that people reclaim their souls, because creation is the only way to say yes to life. Not the yes of passive acceptance, but the yes of one who dares turn chaos into new order, suffering into the stuff of meaning. And so the will to power isn't just philosophy, it's the art of living, the art of birthing yourself in every moment. When you stop waiting for meaning and start creating it, you've stepped out of the herd. From the will to power, a new image of humanity begins to form. I call it the Übermensch, the overman. Not a superhero of power in the shallow sense of violence or domination, but one who overcomes himself, transcends the limits that society, morality, and fear have bound him with. The Übermensch needs no one to grant power, nor asks permission to live. They redefine the meaning of everything, from joy to pain, from good to evil, from victory to defeat. Such a person doesn't seek God, nor needs salvation. They save themselves through action. They don't stand in temples, they build temples in their own hearts. They don't beg for meaning, they create it. They gaze into the abyss and smile, because they understand that only in the abyss can freedom be born. This person walks the tightrope between beast and God, and it's that precariousness that makes them alive. They are not perfect, but they are authentic. Not omnipotent, but self-mastering. They are not controlled by fear, nor lulled by hope. They can love life even when it's painful, because they see in pain a form of vitality. The overman doesn't deny darkness, they reconcile with it and use it to create their own light. They don't seek peace by avoiding conflict, but by standing in chaos with a steady heart. And from that contradiction between instinct and reason, between fear and courage, between life and death, they forge their true essence. They understand there's no one out there to judge, no one to save, no one to ask permission from. All power lies in the hands of those who dare take responsibility for their own lives. Society wants people to obey, religion wants them to bow, morality wants them to feel guilty, but the Übermensch doesn't bow, doesn't repent, doesn't blame. They stand tall, look at life and say, I choose to live by my own laws. It's that choice, not physical strength, not political power, that makes them transcendent. Because those who dare write their own laws for life are the only ones truly free. They don't live to please the crowd, but to express the creative essence of life. They don't seek belief. They become proof of belief in their own existence. This world doesn't need more followers, people repeating others' words. The world needs those who dare to be themselves, even if the price is loneliness, difference, and sometimes the pain of existing. But only in that pain do people truly touch life. Once the overman is born from creative will, the journey doesn't end in affirmation, but goes deeper into acceptance. That is amor fati, love of fate. This is the philosophy not of the weak, who resign themselves, but of the strong who love, even the tragedies of their lives. Amor fati doesn't say life will be easy. It says life in its entirety, with suffering, loss, mistakes and happiness, is worthy of love, because only when you accept everything as it is, do you become truly free from resistance. The Creator doesn't curse darkness. They use it to carve light. They don't ask why they must suffer, but what they can turn suffering into. Every crack, every mistake, every collapse is material for growth. Loving fate means understanding that every event in life, no matter how cruel, is a necessary part of the bigger picture, one you only see in full when you step back. Amor fati is saying yes to life, even when life says no to you. It's smiling at adversity, not because you like suffering, but because you know suffering is the fire that forges strength. Only those brave enough to love darkness can bring true light. Because loving life, only when it's favorable, is another form of fear. Loving it in adversity is the strength of the free soul. Loving fate doesn't mean surrender, but turning every circumstance into an ally. When you stop fighting reality, the energy once used against it becomes creative energy. And in that moment, life stops being something that happens to you. It becomes what you're creating. Amor fati is the art of reconciling with yourself, with time, with everything that once hurt you. Love your life not because it's comfortable, but because it's yours. Only when you love your entire destiny, without selection, without judgment, do you enter absolute freedom, freedom to be yourself, fully without fear, without resentment, and without needing any salvation beyond your own gratitude for existence. Don't live like someone dreaming in someone else's dream. Don't let your life become a copy of an old idea, an outdated mold, or an illusion drawn to keep you obedient. The world will always whisper in your ear to obey, to trust, to do the right thing, but right, according to whom? They call it morality, but it's just a form of fear, fear of choosing for yourself, fear of taking responsibility for your own life. Abandon imposed moralities. Dare to step out of the comfort zone of approval. Don't seek recognition, because recognition is the most subtle form of control. When you live to be loved, you've sold your soul to the crowd. Stop trying to be good according to others' definitions. Good isn't obedient. Good is honest. Honest with your instincts, with your desires, with the creativity calling within you. Create your own values, not with words but with actions. Don't just dream of freedom. Live as a free person, even if the price is loneliness, misunderstanding, wounds. True freedom isn't comfortable, but it's the only thing worthy of the human soul. Look at life. Don't fear the cracks. The caterpillar melts to become a butterfly. The seed cracks to become a tree. The soul must shatter to be free. If you cling to your old form, you'll die in the safety of the shell you once called I. Rebirth comes only to those who dare dissolve. Don't wait for the world to give you miracles. Become the miracle. Step out of the collective dream, out of the cycle of expectations and disappointments, out of the illusion that someone knows you better than you do. Every person is born with a unique spark, but most extinguish it to be like others. Relight that fire. Believe in the creative power within you. Remember, the world doesn't need more repeaters. It needs those who dare create. Don't ask what the world wants from you. Ask what in me longs to be born, and then live for that, even if the whole world doesn't understand. Because the world has never understood pioneers, but those who dare choose their own path, are the ones who truly live. This life owes you no meaning. You must create it yourself. And when you do, you won't need approval, praise, or salvation. You'll need only one thing to be yourself, completely, intensely, without permission, and without regret. Because this is your life, and no one can live it for you. Thank you for listening to the end. If these thoughts resonate with you, please subscribe to join me in continuing the journey of exploring the true meaning of freedom and existence. See you in the next shares, where we'll dive deeper into the art of living as yourself.